Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In my last video, I showed you a very simple system of encumbrance, in other words, working out whether you had enough, in this case, bearers to carry the weight of the equipment, etc., that you have. And it was simple in that it was all or nothing. You either had enough bearers to carry the stuff that you need on your expedition, and in which case you can set out, or you don't, in which case you can't go. What I'm going to show you in this video is a more complex system where there are degrees of penalty, where you might be completely unable to set out, or you might have a sort of mild penalty or a medium penalty or a quite severe penalty or no penalty at all. So we can see here the opening screen. It's almost the same as it was last video, except that except for right down the bottom, what happened before, as in from the last video, is that you would press a button that said continue, and then it would give you this choice that when you're ready to decide how the expedition would travel, and you'd click one of those. And I've tightened that up into, instead of clicking continue and then having a choice, which seemed to be sort of pointless to have those two stages. Now we've only got one. But that's not the main thing I want to show you. I want to show you what I mostly want to show you is on the next screen. So let's say we decide we want a missionary and a doctor to come with us, for example, and we choose by canoe. All right, so we notice immediately that there is a new list, or at least if you've seen the last video, you might notice that there's a new entry in this little sheet here. There's the number of canoes. And that everything else is the same. We've got scouts, we can hire guards. Hiring guards involves getting muskets if we need muskets, and so on. But the message, this is the same, how much it will cost out of how much it's remaining. But this message is different. You don't have enough canoes to carry the expedition. Each canoe can carry 300 items, counting each person as 15 items. You must buy more canoes or reduce your personnel or equipment. So let's say that having read that, we say, all right, well, I'll buy a canoe. Immediately the message changes. It says you need at least one bearer per canoe to be able to travel upriver. And that's sort of common sense. Obviously, each canoe needs to have somebody rowing it. In this setting, the division between scout and guards and bearers is quite rigid. Guards will not do anything but guard. They won't take a turn at paddling the canoes. They won't carry stuff. They will just carry their own rifle and nothing else, or musket rather, and nothing else. So we need at least one bearer per canoe. So let's say, all right, we'll hire a bearer. Now it says, it's slightly better. It says you've got fewer than 2 bearers per canoe, which is right. We've got 1 bearer. And so will receive a large penalty to its movement speed. You need at least 2 bearers per canoe to receive only a moderate penalty, at least 4 per canoe to receive only a small penalty, and at least 8 per canoe to travel at full speed. Also, it says that you need at least 4 bearers to carry a canoe, and so if you come to a waterfall, you'll have to continue on foot, because the bearers can't, one bearer can't lift the weight of a canoe and carry it over. This is when you're going, when you have a waterfall, and obviously when you're sailing upriver or rowing upriver, you can't go up the waterfall, so you have to get off the river, and then the bearers carry the canoe and everything else past the river, and then you sort of set off again. So if we say, all right, we'll get another bearer, it says, okay, you've got at least 2 bearers per canoe, and so you get a moderate penalty. Okay, well, let's listen to this message and go to 4 bearers, and then the message changes again. You have 4 bearers per canoe, and so you only get a small penalty. All right, let's say we want to go at full speed, so we'll go all the way up to 8. and it says the expedition has at least 8 bearers per canoe and so can travel at full speed. However, that will immediately change because we might say, well, actually, I want far more rations than that. So if we keep going up there, we soon find that we don't have enough canoes to carry everything, and so we'd have to get another canoe. Well, now we don't have 8 bearers per canoe, and so we need to get more bearers, and so on and so on. But it is working as it claims here. It seems to be consistent. It does seem to say when it tells you, well, you've got 4 bearers per canoe, that seems to be right. We've got 8 bearers and 2 canoes. So the maths seems to be adding up. So that's what it does. As usual, let's spend the rest of the video looking at the code that allows that to happen. So the code that I've changed since the last video is almost all in this page. You might notice that expedition choice, the code for expedition choice, is now only called from one page, and so there's no point having it as a separate page. And I will fix that. I'll just get this code and put it in here rather than having an include. One thing I will say is I've changed I wanted to have things in the same order listed as they are in the game, and unfortunately horses, camels and canoes were all put first rather than afterwards, so I had to change all of these numbers. So for example, Scout used to be entry number 1 in the list of items, and now it's entry number 4, and everything else has sort of gone up by 3 as well because of these 3 being put in. So the numbers won't be exactly the same as they are from the previous video, and that is the reason why. But so let's have a look at this page. We'll zoom in a little bit. Just to remind us, 3, when E is 3, that means we've chosen a canoe expedition. 1 is foot, we've already looked at that. That was last video. 3 is canoe, which we're looking at this video, and hopefully we'll get up to mounted on the next video. But anyway, let's look at the changes that we had to make. So this is the div ID that's used for the replace function, so we can avoid that flickering. And this is the table, the main bit of information on this particular page. Note that when I changed EN, I didn't have to change any of the for loops when I changed EN and EX and EC, which are the arrays that keep track of the nature of the different things people that you hire or resources that you buy. Because I'm using this .length -1, it just automatically looks at how many entries are in that array and then goes up to that number. So that's a good example of why you should, why you find it easier to do it that way. So the first thing we need is, this is a for loop that goes from 1 to, as I say, the length of EN. So it'll do as many as it finds in this array. We first need to specify that if E is equal to 1, which means it's a foot expedition, and Z is less than 4, then we don't need to do anything to print it, because horses, camels, and canoes are not found in foot expeditions, at least not purely foot expeditions. And I've decided that you can have a mixed expedition where some people are on foot, but you've also got horses, and I've decided to classify that as a mounted expedition. So for foot expeditions, don't show horses, camels, or canoes. I haven't done the equivalent for mounted expeditions, which will be just don't show. Well, it'll be a bit complicated actually, because it depends on we have to have a variable for what sort of terrain you're starting with. And so if you're starting in desert, it will show you will have the option to buy camels. And if you start in any other terrain, you will have the option to buy horses. And of course, you will never have the option to buy canoes if you're doing a mounted expedition. So this one's going to be slightly more complicated. But for what we're doing today, which is E is equal to 3, if E is equal to 3 and Z is less than 3, then don't bother printing anything, because that's a horse or a camel. And obviously, you can't take horses or camels in canoes. These are, like, if we were talking about sort of great big modern type of ships, maybe, but these are very small ships where, you know, you couldn't really do that. Well, not ships, small craft, I suppose, where you couldn't fit an animal. All right. So this we've already looked at. It's just that, as I've said before, the numbers will be different because of adding those 3 new entries. So we can skip through sort of most of this code, which is just the minus and plus buttons and telling you how much you've got and how much each one costs and so on. But now we come to where the changes are. So the code that we had before is within this. If E is equal to 1, if it's a foot expedition, then we look at bearers. The bearers can carry up to 10 items. We find the number of spare muskets and add that to the weight of the rations and the gifts. And again, if E equals 2, well, we haven't done that yet. But here's what we want to look at today. This is the else. So E is always 1, 2, or 3. So if it's not 1 and it's not 2, we can assume that it's 3. Sometimes I will do it like this. Sometimes I'll say else if E equals 3, then do that, then do all this code. And then at the end of that code, I would have another else. And within that else, I would say print, error in capital letters or something, because that else should never come up. But in this particular case, I'm being a bit more careless, I suppose, and I'm just doing an else. So, as it says here, in the rules it specifies that canoes can carry up to 300 items each, and each person counts as 15 items. So, we have a very complicated if. If EX3 times 300 is less than bracket 1 plus $P0 plus EX4 plus EX5 plus EX6 all times 15 plus EX7 plus EX8 plus EX9, then you get a message that says you don't have enough canoes to carry the expedition, and a little explanation of sort of how much, what the capacity of each canoe is. So this is quite long, but it's conceptually quite simple. It just means take the number of canoes, multiply that by 300, compare it to, all this is just the number of people. So it's 1 for the explorer, for the player character, plus $P0, which is the number of special characters, the journalists and so on, plus EX4, EX5, and EX6, and that is the scout, if the scout is present, and also the bearers and the guards. So find the number of people and multiply by 15, and then add the objects that you might have, which is the number of muskets, gifts, and rations. And if the number of canoes times 300 is less than all of this, then you don't have enough canoes to carry the people and objects that you want to take. Otherwise, if EX3 is greater than EX6, then say you need at least 1 bearer per canoe to be able to travel upriver. Well, what that from that message, you could probably work out what this means. It means if the number of canoes is greater than the number of bearers, you need a bearer to paddle each canoe. Else, and then we have quite a long bit of code, because if neither of those things are true, if we have at least one bearer per canoe, and if we have at least one canoe per 300 people and objects, or counting the people as 15 objects, then we need to work out a degree of penalty. So this is all within the code where we've got at least one bearer per canoe. We've got enough space in the canoes to hold everyone. So we set z equals ex6 divided by ex3, and that just simply means the number of bearers divided by the number of canoes. In other words, the number of bearers per canoe. How many bearers will be paddling each canoe and we're going to, of course, if there's an uneven number, it'll be rounded down, because if you think about, let's say you had a canoe with 3 people in it, a canoe with 3 people in it, and a canoe with 4 people in it, well, the canoe with 4 people in it probably would be able to go quicker, but not really, because it would have to keep pace with the other 2. So, in other words, 3.5 is going to be treated as being the same as 3, because you move at the pace of the slowest. So the expedition. Sorry, I'll go through the degree. So it's if z is greater than or equal to 8. In other words, you've got at least 8 bearers per canoe. Then give this message. If z is greater than or equal to 4, give this message. If z is greater than or equal to 2, give this message, and if none of those things are true, give the final and worst message. So if z is over 8, you have at least 8 bearers per canoe, and so you can travel at full speed. You've got less than 8, but you've got at least 4. You have a small penalty, and there's a little note to myself and to anyone reading it that the penalty will be 1 movement point. The way this works is you have movement points based on both what you're doing. So horse-mounted expeditions are obviously faster than foot expeditions, for example. And then you have you can choose a pace. You can choose to go cautiously, recklessly, or I can't remember what the moderate one is. And that, if you go recklessly, that moves you faster, which will give you an advantage because there'll be a sort of time limit in the game. But it also gives you a disadvantage in that you're more likely to be ambushed if you come across unfriendly locals. If you're moving recklessly, there's more likelihood that they will get the drop on you, and that might have a bad effect. So if neither of those 2 things are the case, we see, well, are there at least 2 bearers per canoe? And if so, we say you get a moderate penalty, which is 2 movement points according to the notes. And if none of those things are true, then you have fewer than 2 bearers per canoe, but you definitely have 1, because none of this code will execute if you have less than 1. Because if you have less than 1, then this code will have executed instead. And the code that we're talking about only happens if that code doesn't execute. So you have fewer than 2, and then there's another little note, which is that if you have less than 4 bearers, you don't have enough bearers to carry a canoe, and so if you come to a waterfall, you have to leave the canoe that you have. That doesn't stop you setting out if you want to be reckless. I don't know that you could have I haven't sort of tried to work it out, but I don't think you could have a sort of functioning expedition with less than 4 bearers probably. But anyway, it will give you that. It will give you that message. Nothing here will stop you setting out. It's all just a message, because if you have at least 1, you might want to load up. You might want to go slowly, and that might be fine. So therefore, this will execute regardless of any of this. The ifs here end there and you continue, and this if ends here and you continue. So you'll always end up getting the option to set out, and then you get the same option that we had before, where you can start again. And that's this, by the way, is the thing that I should fix. I should take this code and copy paste it, replacing that line. But anyway, so that is a slightly more complicated system of encumbrance. Usually in role-playing games or RPG-like games, when you talk about encumbrance, it's more for individual characters. It's more like you're not so much comparing the number of people to the total weight. Usually you're saying a character can carry a certain weight of items, and usually maybe it depends on their strength or their constitution, or maybe there's different races have, maybe dwarves have bonuses or something like that. Trolls can carry more than elves, and so on. In this case, the character, it's sort of effectively that the whole expedition is like a character, I guess. You don't so much choose your stats as an individual. It's more the nature of the expedition is how you how different plays of the game will be different. But the basic principle is the same. You have a certain number of bearers. They can carry a certain amount. We need to work out what that amount is, what amount what you've got so far weighs, and either say, no, you absolutely can't move at all, or you get a certain penalty. There's also that little extra thing about if you have less than 4 bearers. The reason it's less than 4, it's not like 4 times the number of canoes, is that you can make several trips. If you somehow had 4 bearers and 4 canoes, you could still get past the waterfalls. Just you need to go back and forth. What would be happening in the fiction of the game is the bearers would all carry one canoe up, and they'd sort of put it on the beach, and then they'd come back and get the second one. That will cost you more movement points, but it won't. It's not impossible. It's not something you can't do. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.